This tiny module takes digital audio straight from your controller and directly drives a speaker. You have probably seen it in AI chatbots, music streamers, desk assistants, but almost nobody actually explains how it works. Today, we are fixing that. We are going to break down the data sheet, understand the basic architecture, and compare the different modules available in the market with their schematics. Stay till the end, and you will never look at this chip the same way again. Namaste, and welcome back to Avinashee Tech. This module connects directly to your controller, like an ESP32, using digital I2S pins. And on the other side, you plug in a speaker. Notice something, there's no external DAC, no analog front end. This single chip is doing everything. If you search online, you will find the most popular version is the Adafruit module, and of course, its cheaper clones. The schematic looks something like this. Then there's another common design, the SparkFun module and its clones. And here the schematic is slightly different. So what's actually changing between these designs and why? To answer that, we need to understand what's happening inside this chip. Let's jump into the datasheet and we will come back to this schematics once everything makes more sense. This chip supports PCM encoded audio input, which is simply a way of representing analog audio as digital samples. Now the good part is, this format is already supported by the ESP32's I2S peripheral, and even wave audiophiles store their audio data in PCM format, so we don't need any special conversion. But don't confuse this with the PCM hardware interface. PCM encoding is about how audio data is represented, whereas I2S or PCM interface is about how that data is physically transmitted between devices. In fact, both I2S and PCM interface carry the same PCM audio data, but they differ slightly in timing and synchronization. So in short, same data, different ways of sending it. Looking at the simplified block diagram, on the left we have the incoming PCM audio. This first goes into the digital audio interface, which can be an I2S receiver or a TDM receiver, depending on how we configure the chip. The digital audio is sent to the DAC, which converts it into an analog signal. Now, an important point here is that DAC works with an anti-imaging filter. The job of this filter is to remove high-frequency components that could create unwanted spectral images during the DAC process. For example, if your sampling rate is anywhere like 16 kHz, your usable audio frequency bandwidth is up to around 8 kHz, and this filtering ensures we stay within that limit. After the DAC, the signal is fed into a Class D amplifier, which uses high-speed switching of MOSFETs to efficiently drive the speaker. There's also a gain control block to set the output level, and a shutdown and channel select block to enable, disable, or configure the device. Let's start with the pinout. It's quite straightforward. We have VDD and ground for power, SD mode for shutdown and channel configuration, gain to control the amplifier gain, D-in for I2S digital data input, DCLK for the bit clock, LRCLK also called WS for left-right channel clock, and finally out P and out N, which form a differential output to directly drive the speaker. Now, looking at some key specifications, the supply voltage ranges from 2.5 to 5.5 volts. Quiescent current is around a few milliamps, which is fine for most applications but not ideal for long battery power designs. That's where the shutdown mode helps significantly by reducing current consumption. The PSRR is good, meaning small noise on the power supply, like ripple from the ESP32V in pin, won't significantly affect the audio output. The chip supports 4 ohm and 8 ohm speakers, and here's something important. Look at the relationship between output power and THD plus N. THD plus N here means total harmonic distortion plus noise. At higher power levels, for example around 3.2 watts into 4 ohms, the distortion can go up to around 10%. But if you operate at slightly lower power, around 2.5 watts, distortion drops to about 1%, giving much cleaner and more usable audio. Look at these graphs showing THD plus noise versus output power. In the first row, we have an 8 ohm speaker, and in the second row, a 4 ohm speaker. Across the columns, supply voltage increases from 3.7 volts to 4.2 volts and then to 5 volts. Inside each graph, there are 3 curves corresponding to different audio frequencies: 100 Hz, 1 kHz, and 6 kHz. Now, observe the trend. At low output power, distortion is relatively low, and it even improves slightly as power increases. But beyond a certain point, distortion rises very sharply. This is the region where the amplifier starts to clip and can no longer produce the waveform accurately. You can also see that increasing the supply voltage allows higher output power before this distortion spike occurs. Comparing speaker impedances, a 4 ohm speaker draws more power than an 8 ohm speaker, which is why the output power is higher in the second row. Finally, frequency plays an important role as well. Lower frequencies like 100 Hz show less distortion, while higher frequency audio like 6 kHz shows more distortion, especially near the higher power region. So overall output performance of your amplifier depends on the speaker impedance, supply voltage, and frequency content of your audio signal. And if this combination pushes the amplifier close to its maximum power, audio quality will degrade significantly. Now let's talk about the internal digital filtering. Based on the sampling frequency 16 kHz in our case, the low pass filter or anti-imaging filter is designed that we talked about few moments ago. Let's put Fs as 16 kHz and we get ripple cutoff value as 7088 Hz, minus 3 dB cutoff as 7136 Hz, stop band cutoff as 7424 Hz, and stop band attenuation as 75 dB. Using these values, the filter looks something like this. So effectively, the signal is confined within the expected bandwidth of roughly 8 kHz, which aligns with the Nyquist limit. Moving on to I2S timing, we have BCLK, LRCLK, and the data line. The chip supports 16, 24, or 32-bit audio, and BCLK must be a multiple of LRCLK. For 16 kHz sampling, 16-bit audio with 2 channels left and right, BCLK equals 512 kHz. This value is within the expected operating range. The WS or left-right clock should have setup and hold time of at least 10 nanosecond in relation to BCLK clock. Once WS clock line is ready, witness the data change happens on second rising edge of BCLK, basically 1 bit shift. This here is in line with Philips format that we came across with ICS43434 mic as well. One important thing to note here is the I2S data format difference between the MAX98357A and MAX98357B. For the A part, the device follows standard Philips I2S format. However, the MAX98357B uses a left justified format. This is very similar to Philips format but without the 1-bit delay, meaning the data is aligned directly with the word select or left-right clock signal. That said, both parts sample data on the rising edge of the bit clock, so that behavior remains same. Another key difference is the polarity of the LRCLK clock. For MAX98357A, a low level corresponds to the left channel and a high level corresponds to the right channel. For B, this is reversed. A high level indicates left channel and a low level indicates the right channel. So when configuring your I2S peripheral, it's important to match both the data alignment and LRCLK polarity based on the specific part you are using. The data bit setup and hold time is same as well. Now, the SD mode pin is quite interesting. Internally, the chip uses comparators to detect different voltage levels on this pin and configure operation accordingly. If it is pulled to ground, the chip goes into shutdown mode. If tied high directly, it selects left channel only. Using different resistor values, you can select right channel only or combine stereo channels into one mono output. With microphones, we build stereo by combining two mono sources. But with a single speaker amplifier like this one, we do the opposite. We combine stereo into one mono output. And if you want a true stereo output, you have to choose either left or right channel on one module and the other on second module, which will look something like in this picture. The lower amplifier in this picture is selecting the right channel, while the upper one is selecting left channel, provided there is a high on GPIO pin. The datasheet even provides resistor selection guidelines and you can calculate custom values based on your supply voltage. Coming to the amplifier, this is a Class D amplifier which uses high frequency switching of MOSFETs to efficiently drive the speaker. Compared to Class AB amplifiers, Class D has much higher efficiency, while Class AB generally has lower distortion. This chip tries to balance both using their proprietary approach. As you can see, in a typical Class D amplifier block diagram, there is usually a LC filter placed between the switching stage and the speaker. This filter helps reduce electromagnetic interference or EMI caused by the high frequency switching. However, this particular chip claims to use internal techniques to significantly reduce EMI emissions, which allows it to operate without requiring an external LC filter. Another important feature is built-in protection. The amplifier monitors the speaker current and if it exceeds around 2.8 amps, it detects this as a fault condition and disables the output. Once the condition returns to normal, amplifier resumes operation automatically. Finally, gain selection. If the pin is floating, we get around 9 dB. If it's connected to ground, 12 dB. And if it's connected to VDD, then we get 6 dB of gain. And using resistor configurations, you can reach up to max around 15 dB of gain. One last practical point, the output power doesn't just depend on the chip, it also depends on your PCB layout. Higher trace resistance or poor routing can reduce the actual power delivered to the speaker, so layout matters. That wraps up our datasheet overview. Now let's quickly go back to the schematics we left midway and make sense of them, starting with the Adafruit module. Here, the SD mode pin is connected to VDD through a 1 mega ohm resistor. Based on the equations mentioned in the datasheet and inserting VDD value as 5 volts, we get different resistor values to select different modes. Direct connection to VDD selects the left channel only. Connecting with around 370 kilo ohms of resistor selects right channel only. And if we connect a 1 mega ohm resistor, we enable left and right mixing, giving us a mono output. So as we can see, this board is configured for mono output by default. We also have decoupling capacitors on the power line, which help stabilize the supply, and gain pin is left floating, setting a default gain of around 9 dB. On the output side, there's a ferrite bead. Along with a capacitor, this forms a simple EMI filter, helping reduce high frequency noise from the Class D switching. Now moving on to the SparkFun module. Here the speaker is connected directly across the differential outputs. And again we see proper decoupling on the power pins. By default, this board is also configured to mono output using a similar resistor on the SD mode pin. However, this design gives you more flexibility. With shoulder bridges, you can select either left or right channel individually. Don't follow the labeling as it is opposite, that is left and right channels are somehow mistakenly interchanged. Anyway, so yes, it's just controlling the SD mode voltage levels to select different modes, and if you use two of these boards together, you can actually build a true stereo output system with one handling left and the other handling right channel. I personally have ordered a board based on this SparkFun style design, and in the next video we will use it with an ESP32 in the ESP environment for a full hands-on demo. If you found this video useful, don't forget to like, share and subscribe the channel for more such amazing content. This is Avinashee Tech, signing off.